I'm going to start this video off by sharing a statistic that might be a surprise to you, which is the Bears' offensive line in terms of pass blocking grade actually ranks 11th best in the NFL using PFF data. Now, PFF is not everyone's cup of tea. There are people who swear by it, there are people who hate it, but it is an interesting stat, right? Because if you hear Bears fans talk, they will say that their offensive line has been horrible and has been an absolute abomination. At least some Bears fans will say that. But if you look down the line at their 5 starting players, you have to question, well, which one of those 5 starting players do you think has played horrible? The number you see next to them is where they rank in terms of PFF grades. This is overall data, not just pass blocking, but still, you see that those are 5 players who have all graded relatively well at their position, at least above average. The worst is Braxton Jones, but he's still 30th best out of these 77 eligible tackles. Now, Chicago has had 2 games this season where they had a backup offensive lineman, and in both games, that backup offensive lineman did not play particularly well. One of those games is the one we're going to talk about in this video against Arizona. They were missing their left tackle, so that's a big player to be missing, right? But still, you have to wonder, well, then why do I feel like every time I watch the Bears play, it feels like Caleb Williams is running for his life? What's happening here? If you look at his time to throw numbers, it's definitely, he's, on the high end. He holds on to the ball 8th most in football, over 3 seconds per snap typically, which is definitely, a large number. You look at the other guys, it's usually like Mahomes and Lamar Jackson who hold on to the ball for a while because they're trying to make something happen, right? Which Williams certainly falls into that category as well, but that's going to be a factor here. Although maybe the bigger number is this one. This is a chart right here, which, just to explain what it is, this is the percentage of pressures where the position group shares some of the responsibilities. So how often, when there is a pressure, was part of it your fault? And they measure it by quarterbacks, offensive line, and then other players, such as a halfback or tight end who's blocking. Caleb Williams' 19.6% is 6th highest in the NFL, whereas their offensive line is only 28th highest and other is 26th highest. So for the Chicago Bears, a huge chunk of their pressures is coming from Caleb Williams. Now, again, they also get pressured more frequently, so it's not to say there aren't plays that are the offensive line's fault, just that out of the plays where a pressure does happen, a larger chunk of them are the quarterback's fault compared to other teams. Okay, that's the numbers, but let's watch some tape, because all that is numbers, all that, sure, fine, but what am I exactly talking about here? Let's get into it. This play is a good example of what I mean, because I've had this theory for a while, and I really do believe it, which is that when a quarterback gets sacked, every single time the commentator says, what a great job by the edge rusher, and then you as a fan watching it say, oh wow, our offensive line didn't do a great job. This play is a great example. It's a 3rd and 13, so that matters because the offensive line is going to be pass blocking. The defensive line knows it's going to be a passing play, so they don't have to worry about a potential run. And you see, despite this, there is even with a 5-man rush, a decent amount of time for Caleb Williams. This is 3 seconds into the play, right on the dot, 3 seconds into the play. That's usually more than you're going to get, especially with a 5-man rush. But the issue is, Williams doesn't love what he sees and is going to hold on to the football. Because of this, he eventually gets sacked. That's a play that, watching it live, is a great example of one that you probably would just say, oh wow, offensive line needs to play better. That stinks, especially if you're just a fan, eating a pizza, having a beer, and watching the game. But the reality is that wasn't really a poorly blocked play, I would say, by the Bears. This one probably a clearer example, although I do think the average fan can probably realize what's happening here. But still, it still is something that can kind of go unnoticed sometimes, where, again, Caleb Williams going to take the snap. You see how he looks, doesn't love what he sees further down the field, although there actually was a couple players open. That's another factor here is, sometimes there's no one open, and it's not really Williams' fault. Sometimes there are players open, and even a check down open. But here we're 3 seconds. It's 3.66666 seconds into the play right here. We're 3 2/3 seconds into the play. Williams looking down the field, has guys open, and is electing to not make a throw. Ultimately, a player who was blocked behind Williams comes over and, makes a sack. Okay, listen, that sack is going to get charged on the offensive lineman. That's not a poorly blocked play by any of the offensive linemen right there. That's a mistake by Caleb Williams. That is a quarterback sack. So, they need to cut down on those. But going over here, I actually think this is the biggest issue that the Bears are currently facing, is they give up way too many of these style of pressures, which is this team cannot pick up a blitz to save their life. I mean, this is happening all the time. There are so many free rushers. And again, it's one of those things where I think the average fan, when watching it, when they see a pressure come immediately, they just say, wow, our offensive line stinks. But a lot of times it's not the offensive lineman's fault, or sometimes it kind of is. Let's get into some examples. This play, you see the blocking concept for the passing play, the pass protection concept. Those 5 Chicago Bears offensive linemen will be blocking the 5 Arizona players you see on the field if they happen to rush the passer. The guy towards the bottom of the screen is going to drop back into coverage, but that's less important here. Because watch that player right there. He's going to be blitzing on this one. Okay, so who can pick him up? Well, there's nobody there. Watch. I mean, you see he gets through completely, I shouldn't say completely untouched. The backup left tackle does a pretty good job at slowing him down before getting over to block someone else, but still, it's mostly untouched. What can you do if you're Caleb Williams? It's a tough spot. He could throw it over there. There is the old expression of, throw it to where the blitz comes from. It's an option for sure. Instead, he's actually able to, make a move and get around this. It's Budda Baker who's running after him, throws the ball away. That's a good play by Caleb Williams, right? Not getting away from the pressure and being able to throw the ball away. But that's definitely a situation as well where you can't help but watch that play and say, they can't be giving up free rushers like that. It's difficult, and the Bears have really struggled with this season. This is something Arizona was doing a good job of, was you see how many players are at the line right here. They have, 6 defensive players who are at the line, showing as though they could pressure. Those are the guys who will, and that's the guy who won't. They're going to drop someone back on the bottom of the screen. But in doing this, you now have 5 players essentially all towards the top of the screen. The hope is that the left tackle won't even block on this play because the guy who he's supposed to block is dropping back into coverage. That, they're kind of, trying to really get the blitz going on one side of the field. Watch as when, this play begins, you see Caleb Williams right here, looks up, and there's an immediate pressure. There's a guy coming right in his face. Usually what you want to do in these situations is have a player who's on that side of the field run what's called a hot route, which is they kind of take a few steps, turn around, and you can just fire it to them quickly because now there's no one in the area and you can make the play work. Here, that's not what happens. Williams, kind of just throws the ball away, which, hey, good job by him. Also, that Arizona player sort of decided to jump instead of just running forward and getting a sack there. Kind of a weird decision on that one. But that's part of what I think Chicago needs to do, is just get these hot routes going, right? They're not doing a very good job with hot routes, and if you can't, you can't pick up a blitz and you can't run hot routes, okay, you're not going to be successful because teams can realize that, and then they just blitz you, and what are you going to do? Part of this is on the receivers as well. People always talk about sacks. Usually they blame the offensive line. Some people will also blame the quarterback. But there is the third thing to blame, which is sometimes it's receivers that are causing sacks. This play is a great example of that. Watch as when Williams takes the snap, this is really well covered by Arizona. I mean, you look at where Caleb Williams is looking, there's just not a lot open. So, what do you do in this situation? I mean, it's tough. I get why he wants to hold on to the ball a little bit longer. Again, offensive line blocked this play well enough for the play to work. Had someone if someone was open right here, Williams can make the throw and you're good. But instead, he has to hold on to the ball and then get sacked immediately after. So, again, this is how football all comes together, right? People always view it as the offensive line has to block well enough for the receivers to look good. It also goes the other way. The receivers got to get open quick enough so that the offensive line doesn't have to block for forever. It all goes hand in hand. And, listen, I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say there aren't plays when, the offensive linemen just get beat. That happens as well, right? This one. Watch the left guard here. As you see, Williams takes a snap, runs this play action, and immediately is under pressure. Does a pretty good job of, stepping up, and then does a pretty bad job at throwing under pressure. But still, that was not Williams' fault. That's not the receiver's fault. That's the offensive lineman's fault, right? That happens as well. That's totally fair to say, I think. But to me, the biggest issue I have with this Bears offensive line has nothing to do with their talent or how well they block one-on-one. In fact, if you go back, I mean, you're watching all these pressures, very few of them are that play I just showed you, where it's just an offensive lineman getting beat straight up right away. In fact, a lot less of pressures in the NFL are that way than people realize, but especially for Chicago, they're not getting beat one-on-one a ton. Usually the offensive linemen are screwing up plays like this, where you see the blocking concept. So the halfback is going to block the edge rusher toward the offense's left right here if there is a blitz, which there probably is given the way this game is going. So Chicago, they're okay with it, right? There's 6 players who could be blitzing. They have 6 blockers. You're good. Williams takes the snap. He looks over, and it's just the left guard right here for Chicago. Sorry to keep picking on him, but I mean, you have a center who's blocking the guy to your right. I don't know if he just didn't realize what his play was. Maybe he didn't realize the player off the edge is rushing in. I don't know, but watch as, he essentially just lets the guy who was lined up against go. That results in a sack right there. Only a loss of 1. Caleb Williams, did his best on that one, but still, that's just it's an error, and these are the things they have to clean up. Like, okay, listen, some mistakes are going to happen, but you got to know your assignment. You got to know where you have to block. Like this one's another example of that, where it's going to be, first off, 4th and 11. So, Arizona's going to be sending pressure, and it's going to be a passing play, so that has to be mentioned. You see the 2 players that I've put in that black box right there, 2 Arizona players and 2 Chicago players. That's what those 2 Arizona players are going to do. It's called a stunt, where you have them kind of essentially just switch positions, and it can fool the offensive lineman, because you start off ready to block someone, all of a sudden it's someone else you have to block. It can be tricky. There's a reason why you do this, but still, when this play begins, you see this is really poorly done by Chicago. And in fairness, these are 2 guys that aren't used to playing with each other, right? Like I said, backup left tackle in the game. So, that has to be a factor here. But, you have 2 guys on 2 guys and you're blocking neither of them. That's a real issue. They both get through to Williams, who tries to make something happen. A 3rd Arizona player did get free, but he only got free because Williams had to rush so far backwards because of the first 2 guys that then, the 3rd guy gets free. So these are communication things that are resulting in, again, it's 4th and 11. Okay, the game was probably over. You were down 15 points at that point, but that's not a death sentence by any means. If you could have made that play, get a touchdown on that drive, it's all of a sudden the game again. So, it's a big mistake for that to happen. And, for Caleb Williams, probably would have still liked to see him not just rush 10 yards back and then take a sack. But, again, he's trying to make a play happen on 4th and 11. I'm not going to crush him for it. So what does Chicago have to do? Well, they have to start running hot routes, like I mentioned. They have to communicate stuff better. And then this is the one other thing they have to do. So right here, you see that Arizona, they have 4 guys on the line of scrimmage. So this is not an exotic play. 4 guys on the line of scrimmage. Okay, simple enough. Now, we've seen Arizona blitz a lot in this game. You have to be a little bit aware of that. They are going to have another guy blitz. That player is going to rush in. So, okay, that's what they're going to do. Makes sense. So what can you do if you're Chicago? They got to start having guys block that aren't offensive linemen, I think. Like, the halfback should be blocking here, I think. You should be reading, seeing if there's a blitz. If there is, you pick up the guy who's blitzing. They have a halfback in the game. If I'm Chicago and I'm calling plays, this is how I'm doing it. Listen, I'm not saying I could do it better or anything like that. I'm just saying this is something I think they should be doing. As you see, when this play begins, the halfback is not blocking on this one, running a route, which, listen, I don't care how good of a check down route it is. It's not going to help you if there's a free rusher. You can't get to the check down in time if there's an unblocked player. It can't happen. You see the 2 players I've circled. Like I said, you argue, well, what you want to do is throw towards the blitz, but neither one of these routes are open. Arizona's doing a pretty good job of covering this up, but also you need hot routes to get open. You need these quick routes that can get open against the blitz. You need guys who can block blitzers. Caleb Williams, again, tries to do what he can, but he, again, because of the pressure, he goes so far outside that now the left tackle gives up the pressure, on the outside. Hard to blame him when, again, you can only block so far behind you as a tackle. It makes things difficult. So, yeah, it's ugly football right here for the Chicago Bears. What do they do about it? These are fixable issues, and that's in some ways a good thing if you're a Bears fan, is that if the offensive line just stinks, well, then it just stinks. What are you going to do? That's not the case here. They have talented offensive linemen. They're really not doing a great job at communicating. You have to assume part of that is coaching. I think they need to help out these offensive linemen when there are blitzes, because, that's a factor as well. Caleb could probably do a better job on some of these plays, not holding onto the ball for too long. And also, the receivers could do a better job in both just getting open more consistently, and they need to run more hot routes and run more effective hot routes if they're going to be able to survive. Because as of right now, Like, they've looked good this season when teams don't blitz them. Against Jacksonville, like against the Rams, like they looked good in those games. When teams blitz them, they look bad. This offense looks horrible. They have not figured it out. And if I'm Chicago, I'm going into practice saying the blitzing stuff is what we're figuring out. We're going to make sure that we practice blitzes all week because that's what they need to be doing because it's just not working right now. At least that's what I think. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. Always love hearing from y'all. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.